and clients from overseas for almost 25 years now. We are part of Teralex, a global network of law firms where Calvin Chia, my friend Lee Yengyang, Mike, and others are there to help clients from around the globe to invest in our countries. Over the years, what I have noticed is that uh, the the Indian investment market has changed from being being a market for production for exports to a domestic market for consumption. We have seen significant changes in the profile of the investors who are coming into India and also the activities they're carrying out. And I'm happy to share that looking at the current situation, despite there being COVID and the pandemic for last over 2 years, we have done reasonably well. You would notice we still are the sixth largest economy in the world and slated to move up. The pandemic and the last 2 years have demonstrated that the economy can run despite all adversities, and especially for India, where technology is a big factor in part of our economy. Um, most most folks are surprised looking at the investment which happened over the last 2 years in India due to the investments in online facilities, technology, online marketing and e-commerce and similar activities. The investors who are there in India, including some of them who came in the last 2 years, like Uniqlo, which is a huge Southeast Asian chain. So they started about 2 years ago once the pandemic started, and they've continued to grow here. From the Amazon to IKEA to Apple, uh, big names like Tesla to stores which are around the corner like 7-Eleven, they've all invested in India. The interesting part is like when I said that India has moved from being an economy for manufacturing for exports to local consumption. If you look at some of the platforms like Netflix, Prime, Amazon Prime, Uber, they have changed their content to look at the Indian market as a consumption market rather than export market. We are having programming in local languages, not only the Hindi, which is the main language, but over 15 other regional languages where they are investing in India and producing content specifically slated for India. Um, we to to commensurate the economy's growth and I think it's a result of the ease of doing business. We've jumped from 142 second position in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index to 63rd position about 2 years ago during the pandemic. Like you heard from Ying Ying that online formation of companies and other eases which came about in Vietnam, similar relaxations in investments have happened in India for doing business. This budget, which we was recently announced in February 2022, we started with an ease of doing business 2.0, wherein we have further liberalized things, made online uh, main portal for doing business with the government. Uh, the courts have gone to e-courts, wherein during the last 2 years all the hearings were online, and the economy continued to do business uh, while they were not physically available. The starting a business, construction permits, resolving insolvency, which were the key factors which World Bank looked at doing a business in India, we have significantly improved in all those areas. Coming to the investments in India, I'm I'm again and again looking at Vietnam and saying we are doing something similar here, where we have two routes. It's either automatic route, which is for most businesses, and a few businesses where you would need regulatory approvals for investment over 74% or 51%, depending upon the business you are in. Um, Obviously, like some businesses like banking or insurance, you would need local regulatory approvals from the government as well, which any domestic company also does require. Some of the areas where 100% foreign investment is permitted are agriculture and animal husbandry, non-scheduled air transport, air taxi business, automobiles, broadcasting, railways, renewable energy, tourism and hospitality, and the electronic systems. Those are the big ones where we have seen like large investments coming into the country. We do have a small list of activities where you do need approval beyond 49%. Something like airlines, you do still need an approval. However, if you're setting up an air charter business, you don't need an approval. In airlines, also up to 49% is automatically approved. Banking, up to 49% is automatic. And if you want to go above 49, you are allowed up to 74% with a regulatory approval. Defense is an interesting sector where they're saying up to 74% for new industrial license businesses and 49% for existing businesses. They're also allowing 100% if it's a high technology defense sector business. Healthcare. In this pandemic, we saw a lot of companies set up base in India. India was a big base for export of vaccines, and the approval for up to brownfield existing pharma companies or healthcare companies has been increased from 51% to 74% now. Uh, Both healthcare hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, 74% is allowed. Uh, Telecom services, we're still at 49%, but you can go up to 100% with an approval. We saw some amazing transactions during the pandemic. Blackstone committed to invest with their fund of about $50 billion. One of the single largest transactions they did was they acquired a significant interest in the Embassy Real Estate Development Group, and the deal size was 716 million US dollars. Adani again got significant amount of investment in their solar energy and renewable energy projects of about $2.5 billion. Actis invested $50 million. So you're seeing in different areas, energy, real estate, technology, significant amount of investments. One of the large investments was in Geo, a telecom player where everybody almost invested, like Amazon, uh, Google, many other hedge funds, and they had the amount of about $20 billion in one company over a period of a year and a half. Some of the key sectors where we are seeing investments are retail trading. IKEA and Amazon, Apple opened up their stores in India. They're allowed up to 100% foreign investment in them. And retail is becoming a big space, like Uniqlo also set up their facilities in India. E-commerce, again, we allowed 100% through automatic route, and we've significantly grown in ranks in the business to consumer e-commerce business. Amazon has a huge presence in India in terms of their sales. Apple, Xiaomi, they've all been e-retailing their products here. Automobiles has been a long-serving sector in India. Our industry has come a long way. This is another sector where 100% FDI is allowed. We started in early 90s with two automobile domestic manufacturers, and now almost sorry, all foreign automobile manufacturers are in India, and we expect Tesla also to be setting up their first facility in India towards the end of the year. The government, to encourage auto sector, they've come out with a production-linked investment schemes. So they're encouraging both domestic and foreign investors to invest in new projects or expand their capacities, and based upon their sales increase, they are also giving incentives up to 6% of their sales value. Telecommunications, we've seen a huge growth chart. Looking at the Indian demographics of over a billion population, Geo, which I mentioned just a few minutes ago, was a telecom company which got over $20 billion in investment last year. 100% is allowed in that route. And also for the infrastructure providers like dark fiber, email, voicemails, the 100% is allowed, and number of value add services in telecom are coming up. Another big sector is textiles. Uh, the government is promoting growth in that, and they're also offering production-linked investment schemes similar to telecommunications. If you add additional investments into this area based upon incremental sales, they're giving incentives. Uh, we have a large, medium, and small scale sector. The government is pushing that sector to grow the Make in India brand and increase production capacities in India, where a lot of chip manufacturers and other manufacturers in the last 2 years saw shortages. To overcome that, again, export promotion schemes are there to be able to manufacture in India and export, as well as the production linked investment schemes. Facebook is offering business loans to small and medium businesses as they're part of their vital ecosystem. Manufacturing, as I said, 100% is allowed in manufacturing. Different areas. Chemicals is a big sector in India where we're seeing a lot of investments in that sector. Just to add one more thing, if I mentioned just now that up to 100% is allowed in defense if it's access to modern technology. Petroleum and natural gas, though we are focusing more and more on uh, on solar energy, they're allowed in 100% investment in that route. India again gets a lot of investment from all over the world, and you'd be surprised to see Singapore as the single largest investor in India. I guess some of it is related to the tax advantages from some of the countries like Mauritius, Netherlands, Singapore. But if you see, we have investments from all over the world. Looking at the sectors where you're getting investments, you would find that uh, the services sector is the largest sector where we're getting the investments in India from. Here, again, the telecommunications, software development, other similar industries, they are the biggest players, back office call centers and others. The second largest is the software technology parks, which we have, where we got the largest foreign investment. Different sectors, as you can see, from construction to automobiles to chemicals, pharmaceuticals, they have been a big attractors for foreign investment in India. And you would notice that the period is from April to through December 2020, where we were in the midst of pandemic globally. Make in India is a big push which the Indian government is making, and they're providing huge incentives to both domestic and foreign investors to come and invest in India. We've started with startup schemes, and the number of unicorns which we have grown here is quite a number to talk about. The startup scheme skills is to develop skills, build manufacturing facilities, innovation, and of course to protect intellectual properties. Pushes in all the areas in Make in India objectives. Uh, as I mentioned, the production linked incentive scheme is a big game changer for investors in the Indian ecosystem, where if you're in the electronic or technology sector, telecommunications, automobiles, if you're investing additionally or greenfield investments, uh, there's up to 6% of your sales is available as an incentive. Looking at the startups, for the last few years, India has been in the top 25 in terms of the global ranking for startups. And last year, we were again back to 20th. Uh, from 23rd, uh, and it shows that the interest in the startups is growing significantly, and the innovation is at a very big high here. Uh, you'd be interested to see that three of the top cities in India, New Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore, they rank in the 25 global cities for startup ecosystem. Um, of course, USA is the largest number of unicorns to have, but we are not far behind. And at 81, it shows that uh, the number of graduates available with technology degrees as well as workforce is significant to create a good startup system and to also support startups in other countries for their back offices in India or for the development centers in India. We've had quite our share of investors from the South Asian countries in our unicorns. And if you look at the number of companies which have got significant valuations from Zomato to Big Basket, they're in retail, hospitality, uh, uh, on e-commerce and FinCard. Those are the four sectors where we're seeing the maximum investments in the startups. And investors like Tencent, uh, Alibaba, and as well as the Singapore Temesk. So they have played a significant role in the investments in the Indian sector. Some of the new unicorns this year, from Cred, a fintech company, to First Cry, which is for baby products. It's an e-commerce company, to non-banking financial companies like Five Star Business Finance or online pharmacies like PharmEasy. They've all got a good valuation and they've done well here. Even the investors in those have seen growth in their investment valuations. Uh, Coming to the uh, IPOs which we saw, or the capital raisings, we've had about 6.2 billion in this year, which is just in the last year, which was at the peak of the pandemic. Market capitalization has gone up significantly, and the IPOs which we're expecting this year are about 16. Um, Eight of them have already filed their draft red herring prospectuses, and we are expecting more as the year comes along. If you see the IPOs which came up in 2021, almost all of them have done very well. Coming to intellectual property, I think for any ecosystem to do well, respect for intellectual property is very important. And if you look at the cartoon, from the Newton's apple to Mr. Steve Jobs' apple, we do respect all of them, and they have done very well in terms of the IP protection. India is part of the Paris Convention for patent filing, Berne Convention for copyright, Madrid Protocol for trademarks, as well as we have the PCT filings for single filing patent processes. We also do recognize the Washington Treaty for integrated circuits. So IP regime is quite doing well, and we respect the IP rights of foreign investors. We have the ease of doing business in terms of online filing of applications, and there's a reduced fee for startups and educational institutes, as well as we have video conferencing for hearings. The last 2 years, we saw the trademark filings and the patent filings continue as usual. They were all online filing, through the online filings. The hearings with the controllers continue to happen, and the pandemic taught us that the judicial process can continue on an online basis as well. If we look at the number of trademarks and patents which have been filed, it's quite an interesting statistics. As we grew from from physical filing to online filing, the numbers have grown significantly. And again, we're seeing here that some of the Indian brands have become global well-known brand. I'm sure in Thailand as well, the Tatas, the Airtel, the HDFC Bank, Godrej, they are reasonably well known there. We are also protecting the global brands which are here, like Louis Vuitton, John Deere, Toyota, Google. We continue to do that in a significant way. The Coming back again, just would want to mention that some of the brands which had issues earlier, they have with the court systems giving a good support to them in terms of the injunctions and protections they've been provided, whether it was for Albec, where their the franchisees were being offered on an illegal manner, or marks which were similar, like CrossFit, or for CNN News Network, where a City News Network from India. The Indian courts were very swift in granting injunctions in these matters, and they got due protection. We've also recognized non-traditional trademarks like the yodel of Yahoo, or the Pantone shade of Cadbury's Dairy Milk here in India. I recognize that many countries still don't recognize those, but in India we are recognizing them and giving due protection. Uh, Geographical indicators. The Lamphun brocade Thai silk from uh, Thailand is given due protection in India as a geographical indicator, and it cannot be used without appropriate uh, manufacturing and other conditions applied to it. Similarly, in the wines and alcohol industry, tequila, Scotch whiskey, champagne, Bordeaux wine, cognac, brandy, we do recognize them. And in fact, our firm was critical in the first case in Champagne, where we helped the Institut National de Appellation Origin get a protection for the Champagne white sparkling wine in India. We've had our share of infringing trademarks of Bordeaux for Bordeaux, or Cognac for Cognac, and similar marks being infringed, but the courts did block them out. We also have Indian geographical indicators, where you may have heard of basmati rice in Thailand, or the Indian silk, the tea, and many others Indian geographical indicator marks. Uh, we do have border protection for IP, wherein if an IP holder registers their marks in India with the customs, which get a protection of about 5 years, they will be seized and confiscated at the border. We do not allow infringing goods to be brought into India, and it's often we find that the goods getting stuck in India because the products violate somebody's intellectual property in terms of trademarks or even patents. We acted for Samsung, wherein their dual SIMs many years were blocked in India because somebody else had incorrectly got the patent registered in their name, which fortunately we were able to not only get the patent removed from the register, but also allow their handphones to come into India. Any economy without a good judicial system has its own challenges. Arbitration and litigation in India has come a long way, and in the pandemic also we continued with the system despite the limitations. We have Supreme Court at the top, which is the constitutional court. Every state has a high court, which is for both civil and criminal matters. And then the district courts, where magistrates courts takes up criminal matters, and civil judges to take up civil disputes. And they are throughout the country. And also, an e-platform has now started. We have a common e-court website through which there are links for every courtroom, and you can virtually watch proceedings from anywhere in the world as to the litigation processes going on in the courts. In the last few years, there have been a lot of steps which the government took in terms of improving the insolvency code, and the new code came in 2016, which has been very helpful for sale of distressed assets and business in that sector. We had new commercial courts established for commercial disputes, for fast tracking the dispute resolution process. And arbitration, which has been there forever, has continued to evolve with amendments to ensure that the process is speedy and effective for international transactions. The arbitration is now the time-bound process with the amendments from 2015, where you need to get the proceedings completed within 12 months from the completion of pleadings. The arbitrators have wide powers in terms of granting interim protection, and they have protection similar to what a court has the right to do so. Our courts have been very non-interfering in the arbitration processes, and even a challenge to award is possible only on very limited grounds. Uh, for global arbitrations, international cross-border transactions, India is party to New York and Geneva Convention, and the awards granted in any of those countries are recognized in India. And likewise, award from an Indian arbitral tribunal is recognized overseas as well. Um, Talking about foreign arbitral awards, as I mentioned, if an award has been passed in the New York Convention country or the Geneva Convention country, they are enforceable in India. They do not require a confirmation from the court, from the jurisdiction where they have been granted. And the only ground for refusal to enforce the foreign award is uh, if it's contrary to our public policy, which has very limited grounds. And as domestic arbitration in foreign arbitrations also, uh, foreign arbitration also you get interim protection in domestic courts if you have investment in India or the one of the parties has assets in India, you could get an injunction against them here as well prior to the final award. Coming to arbitral awards from the region, I've included a larger perspective just in Thailand and India, and also included Singapore and China, as a lot of the investors we see are from the region. Singapore, China, and Thailand are all signatories, as well as India, to the New York Convention. So, award passed in any of these countries would be enforceable in India as well. And likewise, from an Indian courts, their courts would also recognize. Um, though, as I said, there's no need for confirmation of the award for the Thailand or Chinese or Singapore courts. For the to be enforceable in India. However, if any of the parties wants to challenge the award, they would need to go back to the court where the seat of arbitration was. For example, if the seat of arbitration was Bangkok and it was against an Indian company to be enforced in India, the Indian company, if they wish to challenge the award, they would need to go to the Thai courts and not challenge it before Indian courts. An interesting thing I would like to share here is though Thailand and India are not reciprocating territories for enforcement of court decrees. However, if there was an investment by a Thai company and in India and the dispute arose, the parties could, as part of the dispute resolution process, agree to Singapore courts as the court for enforcement of the judgment for dispute resolution jurisdiction. In which case, a decree passed by a Singapore court would be enforceable in India. So, to overcome the non-reciprocating nature between India and Thailand, if the parties prior to the dispute had agreed to Singapore courts as the court for jurisdiction, they would be able to enforce swiftly a judgment against either of the parties, whether in India or in Singapore. Uh, we for foreign awards, we have a schedule which the tribunal has to adhere to in terms of the fees they can charge. We also have the ability for now third-party funding in India. In New Delhi, similar to SIAC or Singapore International Arbitration Center, the courts have established a New Delhi International Arbitration Center, wherein we've got some good set of arbitrators as on the panel where one could select from and get their dispute resolved. as I mentioned earlier, it's a 12 months period which has been granted for the arbitration to be completed post the completion of pleadings. And with that, I come to an end, and I'll be happy to answer any questions which anyone may have.
Hey, thank you so much, Ravi, for your great presentation. Again, there's lots of questions, but maybe I'll get the ball rolling. I'd like to, one thing that I think foreign investors or prospective foreign investors and foreign investors in India have historically seen as a challenge is the amount of bureaucracy and the number of government approvals needed. Okay, so is that still an issue? You know, what trend do you see, and in what sectors should foreign investors be like particularly aware of a lot of government approvals needed?
In most sectors, you don't need any government approval today, whether it's to set up a manufacturing facilities or for 100% foreign investment. We've seen number of investments from Thailand for manufacturing in different food products or other areas, and we've not seen any regulatory approval required. They can invest similar to what a domestic investor could do to set up business, and they have no restrictions as such for that. Having said that, some sectors like insurance, aviation, telecommunications, pharmaceuticals, you do require approval. And in case you would be going above 74%, it would be a good idea to get a sense prior to the investment to see how the government would view it and how much time process it would take for an approval. We've seen most approvals and the regulatory processes are now available online to view the status of the approval, and we've not had much difficulties. To give you an example, we work for a client in the telecommunication satellite business, and they have invested for setting up a service for the wireless communications through satellites. Unlike cell phones for some of the defense and other sectors, so that's a very critical area as well as in the mountainous region. And they did not have any problem in getting a regulatory approval. And in fact, recently there was a change in equity ownership structure of the said company. There as well, the government very swiftly granted approval. We've come a long way.
Great. That's really great to hear. Okay, another question. Okay, can you talk about what are there any minimum thresholds, like financial thresholds, in order to establish an office, and a Thai company to establish an office in India?
If it's a representative office and they're trying to set up in India, they do have to demonstrate the profitability and minimum net worth. But if they're setting up a wholly owned subsidiary, there's absolutely no minimal, and they can just incorporate a company and remit money to capitalize it. Though we do have a requirement of a resident director now, but that's applicable to all companies in India. But there's no minimal threshold for most businesses.
Okay, that's great. Okay, here's kind of a specific question. Can our company set up a factory in India to produce equipment and sell in the Indian market? Do we have to request government approval first?
Absolutely. No approvals required unless the business is in a regulated sector. So if you were manufacturing guns, which is a defense sector, then you may need a government regulatory approval, which would be applicable to all. But if you were to set up a factory for manufacturing furniture, or you were setting up a factory to manufacture automotive components, no regulatory approval is necessary.
Oh, very, very clear, very clear. Okay, another kind of specific question. How long does it take to set up a company, and what are some potential problems that Thai investors should watch out for?
Uh, the typical time for a company to be set up is about 7 to 10 days. You could, all forms are online to be filed, and a single application would give you tax identification number, director identification number, the goods and services tax registration number, employees provident fund number. All of that comes through in one single application. The steps you need to watch out is if both the investors are from overseas, you need two shareholders for an Indian company to be set up, and the directors are from overseas. You need to make sure that you have applied for their director identification number in advance, or you would need to get certain documents notarized or apostilled, which can take time. So what we recommend is if the client sets up a company through an agent in India like ourselves, and then we transfer the shares and incorporate them as directors of the company. That's very swift.
Also, another specific question. Because there's a lot of ethnic Indians in Thailand, okay? And there's a question about does does the does the law give ethnic Indians any special ethnic Indians born in Thailand or outside India any special treatment under foreign investment law?
Um, there used to be additional benefits available to non-resident Indians, which are which could be second generation or even third generation, like Indians who were born in Thailand, or even whose parents were born in Thailand, or one of the parent was born in Thailand, was born in India. As long as they qualify in the criteria, they were granted certain benefits in investing in certain sectors which were not available to others. Now, in most sectors, there's no additional benefit except aviation, where if you were to set up an airline and you had NRI investors, ethnic Indians from overseas, you would not require an approval. Otherwise, you would require approvals.
Okay, great. Okay, another question about, I know you talked about dispute resolution before. How are legal disputes typically, commercial legal disputes typically resolved in India? I hear the courts can take over 10 years sometimes. I don't know. It may, is that still correct, or is that different now, or what?
Unfortunately, the courts still take a long time, and the pandemic did slow down things further for first 6 8 months before the online courts became full-fledged and things started moving more rapidly. Typically the disputes are resolved by way of arbitration. So if you have an arbitral award in your favor, enforcing that is a much speedier process, and the courts do not usually interfere in awards granted in favor of any of the parties. They would most likely uphold them and enforce them.
Okay, great. Maybe maybe a last question before we close things off. Can you talk about remitting profits out of India? Are there any particular challenges there? Do you to the central bank? Do you have to ask for approval or anything like that?
Uh, no, you don't need any regulatory approval for remitting profits overseas. In fact, your auditor just needs to give a certificate and also certify that the taxes have been paid. If it's dividend, you need to pay additional dividend distribution tax, and post that you can remit any amount of money as long as they are from your profits. There's no restrictions. And in fact, even if you have retained earnings in India or from the profits from previous years, and instead of remitting them out as dividend, you want to invest overseas, to another subsidiary or another business, you can invest overseas up to 4 times the net worth of the Indian company without any regulatory approval. So remitting money overseas is not a problem anymore.
So that's great. I'm afraid we're out of time. But before I let you go, Ravi, thank you for the great information. And we've known each other for going on 20 years. And I can say Ravi is a famous lawyer, really famous lawyer in India. And it's really our great honor to have him here today. And we just thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Sheila.
Hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thanks again.
Okay, as we close today, I would like to mention a book that I published that both Ying and Ravi participated on, SMD's Practical Guide to Business Law in Asia in its 3rd edition. This book covers China, India, Vietnam, Malaysia, Myanmar, Cambodia, Indonesia, and Thailand, and focuses on key things that foreign investors should consider in these countries. And it's specifically written for business people. You see it on your screen here. And if anyone would like a complimentary copy, either a hard copy or online copy, please let us know, at the email indicated, and we're happy to provide you with more.
On behalf of the Stock Exchange of Thailand and Seri and Doyle, we would like to thank you for participation today. The key summary in Thai and in English will be sent an email to you after the event. And please note that our next webinar will be on the 7th of April, and we will cover China and Indonesia using the same format. If you would like to attend, please sign in and register with Google Form in the chat box below. Thank you.